had 10 consecutive podiums on the NorAm this year, David. Like, that's crazy. I looked back through like a ton of the female results. Nobody has had 10 consecutive podiums on the NorAm Cup, which is like, that's a pretty good feeling. And then also just looking back, like, as you're saying, like, what would 80-year-old you say and what would 8-year-old you say? What would 21-year-old me say about winning the NorAm Cup? Like, 21-year-old me would be like, they would be having the best time of their life. So it's like, yeah, that's just where you have to live from, right?
Welcome back to the 172nd episode of the Athletes Podcast, where we dive into the stories, experiences, and insights of every incredible athlete we feature on the show from all around the world. Today, we have the pleasure of featuring SnowboardCross athlete Kennedy Justinen. In this episode, we'll be covering the journeys, challenges, and triumphs that Kennedy's experienced over her career to date. You'll love to hear some of the stories that she shares as she's carved her way into this sport. Get ready for an inspiring conversation with this incredible athlete that you're sure to be fired up for afterwards. We're also incredibly grateful for our sponsor for today's episode, Rooted. If you guys haven't checked it out yet, you've seen it posted on my social medias on the Athletes Podcast. 24 vitamins and minerals, 9 superfoods and probiotics, as well as 3 times the electrolytes of typical sports drinks. If you have not tried it yet, do it right now. I'm drinking it in this cup, and I guarantee you it's worth it. Every single penny you spend. AP18, 18% off. Now, strap in for episode 172 of the Athletes Podcast, featuring this incredible human being, Kennedy Justinen. Here we go. Today, we have the ray of sunshine that is Kennedy Justinen on the Athletes Podcast, born on the first day of summer in 96. Thanks so much for coming on the show, Kennedy.
Thanks for having me, David. It's awesome to be on here. And just, in my sports career, it's super cool to be featured on an Athletes Podcast right now. So I'm stoked about that.
Hey, you're the 2023 North American champion, SnowboardCross champion. Like, that is legit. You can't sell yourself short there.
Yeah, it's pretty sick. Last year I finished 3rd overall, so to win the tour this season was definitely a cherry on the cake and definitely good feelings heading into the off season.
Yeah, tell me a bit about what it's like maybe right now, because you're at Mount Washington. Let's start here where you're at today, training with 25 other incredible athletes. SnowboardCross is a newer sport. Snowboard is like a newer sport compared to skiing. What got you into it? Because at the age of 4 and 10, doing it recreationally in Alberta is a far stretch from winning North American championships. Put it that way.
Yeah, I guess just to start where I am. I'm at a end of season training camp in Mount Washington with my team, and the purpose of this camp is to just sort of push the limit and find the technical places that could put you on your face, put you on your ass, and really work through those things and just basically become better. A mindset that I have going into this, that if there's tears and frustration, then I'm probably in the right place of training. And so, yeah, we've had 4 days on snow already, and yeah, it's been going good. Like, I've heard from multiple of my coaches that this is the best they've seen me ride, which always feels good, but sometimes I'm like, okay, but where's the next step? Where's the next level? Like, good that I'm doing good, but let's keep moving forward. Sometimes that constructive criticism is where I like to sit, because I know that then there's progress being made. But yeah, winning the North American Cup it feels crazy, because I've only been competing for 4 years now, and so to look back at being just a 4-year-old or a 10-year-old learning how to snowboard and then being here now, it feels surreal, because there were so many years in my life where I didn't have access to elite level snowboarding, and so it felt like a bit of a pipe dream. But I'm here and I've done it, and yeah, it's just surreal. There's definitely days where I'm like, there's no way I did that. And so I spend a lot of time literally just writing on paper, I won the North American Cup. I did that, just to try and make it real in my head.
Well, I mean, Andrew Huberman talks about the fact that writing things down is the best way for people to memorize and understand it. And maybe that's your way of reflecting and being like, hey, look at what I've accomplished, right? And yeah, people struggle, myself included, around being almost a self-promoter in the sense of like, hey, I did this. I was able to accomplish this XYZ, and I did it, growing up in Rocky Mountain House in Alberta, learning to ski and snowboard without any real incredible opportunities handed to you, right? Like, that is amazing. And the fact you're able to look back now, see all of that progress is incredible. Is there something that like ingrained that into you when you were younger? Like, I know that you, on your younger years, it was accessible sports. At 18, you moved to Kelowna, but was there a drive that your parents instilled, or what got you excited about snowboard and specifically SnowboardCross as a sport?
It's funny because when I did learn to ski when I was 4, pretty much at that exact same time, I asked my parents if I could snowboard, and they said, no, you're not allowed to snowboard. And then I was like, the next year, can I snowboard? No, you can't snowboard. Oh, the next year, no, still can't snowboard. And then finally at the age of 10, whatever they decided that was a good benchmark for me to switch to snowboarding was, I'm not really sure. But yeah, I just always wanted to do it, always saw people doing it and thought it was super sick. And I think that some of that resistance from my parents came from the fact of like this mindset that, snowboarders are, the badasses or whatever. As you were saying, like snowboarding is newer than skiing. And so I think that my parents coming from a, older conservative mindset, I think that's where some of that resistance came from. And then I'm also a middle child of 2 brothers. And so I think that just my natural personality is to be like a little bit of a rebellion within that. And so maybe my parents' resistance around not wanting to let me snowboard from a young age drove me more towards it. I guess to answer your question, like what drove me to like really do this now is just like, it was inside of me. It was just inside of me. I don't know how else to explain that. I think that probably a lot of people in sport can understand that, or even in business, like if something's calling you, you just have to do it.
So true. Your Instagram and your LinkedIn bio, I believe, say believe, act, and become. And I think that kind of symbolizes it perfectly, or encapsulates it perfectly. I know at the age of 21, you acted on this lifelong desire to compete in elite level snowboarding. There's a decade between that 10-year-old decision and that 21-year-old to act on it. I think back to going through elementary school, what decisions I could have made differently and what that outcome could have looked like nowadays. For you, are there decisions that you made that led to you being able to say at 21, I'm going to do this, and now, mid-20s acting on it and becoming that North American champ?
I think just like that decade that you're talking about mostly comes from the fact that I did grow up in a small town and there wasn't access to snow sports, and so it just wasn't even an option. I knew that I always liked snowboarding, and I used to drive myself from Rocky Mountain House to Lake Louise on some weekends during high school to go and ride by myself or ride with some friends that I had doing it. But I didn't even really know a lot of people that were doing that because we lived so far away. And so when I turned 18, it was like, hey, I'm going to go somewhere that's closer to the mountains. And Kelowna was that place, living in Kelowna. It's only a 45-minute drive up to Big White. And so it was much easier to do that lifestyle. And then the thing that sent me into border cross was being in Big White. They host national and provincial level races there every single year. And so when I was up there casually riding just for fun, like I would see these races and I always was like, that looks sick. And my older brother always said, like, you could probably do it if you wanted to. And so it was just, I think it was like a bit of the maturing of the brain and going like, oh shit, like I've been raised to go after what I want and to do what I want in life. And so this thing is calling me. So like, let's see if we can do it. I'm in the perfect place. It's happening around me. There was just all of these signs like pulling me towards it. So I had to do it.
Yeah. And it's funny, Kelowna is where I am right now recording this episode. I love the terrain. Big White's an incredible mountain. We were just at Revelstoke this past weekend for last day of the season. Not the exceptional status that you guys have being able to board after the mountains closed for the public. But have you ever been to Revelstoke? Where's like your favorite place to snowboard?
I've never been to Revelstoke, but if I had to pick like my favorite spot ever that I've had a pow day would actually be in a place overseas called Lank, Switzerland. And we were over there for a race in the COVID year, and it got canceled because of too much snow and too much wind. And basically they closed the resort to everybody that wasn't already on resort. So it snowed so much and we got so much snow that the lifts were closed. And then when it stopped snowing, anybody that was left on the resort was allowed to go back out. And there was like 60 centimeters of fresh snow for like, I don't know, 20 people. It was insane.
Whoa, that would have been amazing. The Swiss Alps look absolutely insane. Like I can't even imagine. It's one of our bucket list places to go for Phoenix and I. When I think about boarding, and we were talking about this before we started recording, I was flabbergasted to find out that there's like 2, 3, 4x times the amount of athletes, women in particular, that are competing overseas compared to over here in North America.
Yeah, so the field in North America is pretty small, actually. There's usually only about 25 to 35 competitors at each race, and 35 is a push. Like, that's a big race in North America if there's that many women at a race. And in Europe, the field is just bigger. I think that it has to do with the fact that European countries are funded more thoroughly for athletes to be in this super niche sport. It's super inaccessible. There aren't tracks open everywhere all the time. Like, there isn't even a border cross track in Canada that's built up all year round for us to train on. That's why we end up in Europe most of the time. And so, yeah, there's just more women. It's a higher level of competition in Europe. And so obviously making it to that World Cup level and being with those people is going to continue to help me rise.
Why is it that Canadian national sport organizations aren't funding their athletes?
You know what? I can't tell you why. I can only tell you that it's not happening. There is obviously funding available, but it's only available once you reach like some of the highest rankings in our sport on the World Cup. So for example, as a female in SnowboardCross from Canada, to receive only 50% funding from the government, you have to receive a single top 12 result, a single top 8 result on the World Cup, or a 12th overall on the World Cup tour. So yeah, that's putting you like right in the top 10 of women in our sport, and that's just not the case for like European countries. I believe that it's similar to the US. Like, they don't have much funding either, but yeah, it's just much different in Canada compared to Europe.
Especially when you're trying to get to that top level. Like, it's not like you're going to be at that top 10 and then just qualify for funding and it'll be sunshine and rainbows for the rest of your life. It's like, hey, I'm in my early 20s. I've only been doing this for a couple of years. How the heck am I supposed to get there without this additional capital in my pocket? Because I'm not making this money to travel to these events.
Yeah, like, and even if you are winning events, like, winning an event doesn't pay for your season by any means. Not to mention, like, half of your year is spent traveling around the world. So then you can't maintain like a normal job per se to be able to pay for that. So it is definitely an interesting dynamic, because I do understand that governments want to be funding like the top level athletes. That's the purpose of it, is for them to then medal at the Olympics and things like that. But it's like, where's the help for the middle ground, right? There's none.
And for you, having just won the North American Cup, you had 17 races where you were like podium, top 5, top 6, like crazy results. And then your final 3 races don't go necessarily the way you wanted in the World Cup, and now you're not on that list.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, just a ridiculous format when you think about having the natural progression that occurs for an athlete's lifetime. Anyway, that's enough about crapping on the Canadian sport organizations. What I do want to talk about is Cookspark Management and the work we're doing there, introducing you to more brands, introducing you to more opportunities, because frankly, these CSOs are not doing that, and these NSOs have to, if they're not going to do it, someone else needs to. And that's what Lander and I are doing, between the connections we've made with the Athletes Podcast, with LDC Talent. Obviously, we have 20 plus clients in the hockey space, NCAA, Div 1. Now it's snowboard, now it's other athletes across the globe, but specifically focusing on females because they've been underrepresented. You know it. We're talking about it here. Like, maybe you should just shine light on how hard it is to get brands, to get partners. Like, you're having to do all of this work on top of training, trying to promote yourself, trying to get into events. Like, there's so much that comes with being an athlete, and then all of the additional responsibilities outside of just performing in your sport.
Yeah, I'm super excited to partner with CSM for that exact reason. Because, you know, as we're saying, there's no government funding available to me at the level that I'm racing at now. And so then how do I supplement that? And I think the biggest struggle with that too is that, like, these big brands, they don't want you when you're an amateur. And so then it's like, not only are we lacking in the funding from governments, but it's also super challenging to get funding from corporations because you're not at the top, right? So it's like this weird thing. But yeah, I'm really excited to partner with CSM because, like, you guys, yeah, your focus is on women, your focus is women in all sports and at all levels. And so, yeah, it's just like a pretty exciting time. Partnering with an agency is something I've been wanting to do for quite some time as well. And I think that it just helps alleviate a lot of that stress. Like, yeah, it is a lot already to try and balance, like, work, life, performance, and then on top of that having to be a full-on, like, agency and entrepreneur for myself. I've been able to do it, and I have been able to secure some smaller sponsorships, which is really cool. But being at this next level, I know that it's going to take way more focus and dedication to my sport to continue to rise at the world level. And so having more support systems to make all of it come together is just a really exciting time.
Yeah, exciting is an understatement in my opinion.
Yeah.
Like,
Yes.
I think just the opportunities out there are endless. Like you said, you were able to successfully get a couple partnerships yourself, which is incredible, like almost unheard of when it comes to also individual sport, right? You don't have a ton of other people around you. Like, there's a lot going against you right now. So the fact that we're able to showcase kind of what CSM is doing, and like, that's what I've learned with the Athletes podcast. I mean, we're episode 172, 73, and it's every week you get exposed to the ins and outs of someone's life. And more I'm recognizing, and I kind of had a sense of it at the beginning, but it's been 3.5 years, and even more so, it's ever present that women still are not getting the attention that they deserve, even with the incredible results that we've seen, you know, after NCAA when women's basketball results were like 4x what the men's viewership was. I know NWSL is doing incredible. Like, results for female sports are going off the charts, but it's still, you know, 1/10 of what male media attention is getting. So that's where we need to shift that. It's like, at the end of the day, these individuals, these human beings deserve the same attention. We're striving towards equality. That's the goal. Maybe we'll get there. I told a reporter in an article that we'll see them in 5 years, and hopefully by then we'll be able to showcase the incredible work that CSM's done.
Nice. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, as you said, excited is an understatement. I'm just, yeah, super thrilled to see where this goes with you guys.
Well, I think the other part that's exciting is that you are believing in us, right? Like, you've seen the work that we've done. Obviously, Lander's got 3+ years of experience with the hockey space specifically, and there's opportunities, right? And I think for all the young athletes out there that are watching this, you're a testament to the fact that you can do it on your own. You can do it with no training, with no experience, with no money. Like, you have been able to do this so far on your own, frankly. Like, I know there's network support, people around you, but like, you're steering that ship yourself, which is incredible. And you deserve a major kudos, a little Athletes podcast bump. That's why you're on here. You're going to be on future episodes. What's maybe been your biggest learning since making this transition to border cross and having a ton of pressure on you? Because you didn't have that, I'm assuming, growing up for your first 2 decades of life. Like, you weren't playing those competitive sports. So now transitioning into this mode into your 20s, like, how's that transition been?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because, like, I did play competitive sports growing up. Like, I was a huge basketball player in high school. I actually was even scouted to go and play college ball. I never was going to go to college or university though, so I just knew that was pretty much off the table.
Why?
Why?
Yeah.
I'm just not a classroom person. Like that was never
Okay.
my vibe. Even in high school, like I had good grades, but I had good grades because there was a rule that you had to have a certain level of grades to play like senior basketball. But truly, I didn't really care about those school grades. Maybe that's not the
If the
best thing
minimum
to
was
say to young
60,
athletes, but actually the minimum was 70. So, like I
there you
sat in
go.
that 70, 75 range, I could get the job done. So there was pressures within that too, but like we weren't in like a top league or anything like that. So it was still a lot of fun. But having that background in sport and wanting to win those games and like having to rely on a team and trust what a coach was saying, all of those same concepts apply now. I think to some extent, the biggest learning curve I've had to go through is like not putting pressure on myself, and not being super critical of myself. That's like the biggest thing for me. I found myself in some pretty dark places, just putting myself down, feeling like I'm not worthy enough, feeling like I'm not good enough because I didn't have any of the like prerequisite training or coaching or experience or anything like that. And so learning to manage that like internal battle is the biggest pressure that I've had to go through. Everything else has kind of just been, I don't really know how to explain it perfectly, but basically whatever's happening on the outside doesn't matter. What's happening on the inside is like the most important thing for me. So like the like wanting to get the results is like happening on the outside, but just like knowing that those results will come if I'm feeling good on the inside, that's like the battle of pressure that I've had to manage.
That's so insightful.
Yeah.
How do you get out of those dark places? Because that's something that I'm like, everyone's dealt with at one point or another. If you haven't, you're lucky you will.
Yeah.
Maybe listen to what Kennedy has to say here about strategies.
Well, I've been fortunate enough to work with a spiritual guide and energy coach, Danielle Grant, for the last 4 years. She actually offered me a full sponsorship right at the beginning of my career. So I've been able to have somebody in my court that's thoroughly believing in what I'm doing, more thoroughly than myself sometimes, which has been huge. And so the work that Danielle and I have done is a lot of journal work, a lot of meditation work, and a lot of like energy alignment. So like seeing that goal, understanding what that might feel like when we get to that goal, and then like trying to embody that energy now. And then when I get into those dark places, the biggest strategy that I use is something that she taught me at the very beginning, which is something called the 3-step mindset framework. And so what you do with that is like, what am I believing to be true now? And a lot of that time you use that when you're in those dark places. Like, what am I believing to be true now? Well, I'm believing that like I'm shit, everything sucks, and there's no way that I'm going to be able to do this, right? And it's like, okay, well, why am I believing that to be true? That's the second step. Why am I believing that to be true? Well, I'm believing that to be true because I don't have experience, because I'm brand new to this sport, whatever it is. And then it's like the third step is, what do I want to believe to be true instead? And then you go like, well, I want to believe that like I am good enough and I am worthy, and like this course isn't too big for me, or whatever it is. And that's like the fastest way that I've been able to get out of those dark places. Yeah, I don't know if that helps you or if that makes sense or resonates, but try it the next time you're feeling shitty. What am I believing to be true? Where did that come from? And what do I want to believe instead?
Amazing. I will definitely be trying that. I will probably clip that up and put it up on the socials, see what other
Yeah.
people think of it as well. Because I think it's important. One of the things that I wanted to do 3.5 years ago, sitting in my bedroom when I decided, hey, let's start talking to athletes on a weekly basis, is let's showcase the fact that it's not all sunshine and rainbows, right? Like professional sport is a business at the end of the day. You're doing a job. And sometimes for some people, getting paid for that quote unquote job, which used to be the sport you played for fun, makes it worse. And that might not actually be beneficial for you long term to go and continue playing hockey for the next 25 years if that's not what you really want to do, but you think it's cool and you think it gets the girls and you think it gets the cars. Like, it's so maybe it's like peeling back layers of this onion for me and from a personal standpoint, but
Yeah.
I think it's important for people to also hear it from you yourself, going through it, you're experiencing it. I mean, you talk about all these incredible experiences you've had over the past half decade, traveling the world, being able to snowboard in 60 centimeter POW. Where's the place, or are there moments that you reflect back on where you're like, oh, I wish I had changed that? Do you have any regrets ever? Is that something that you eliminate? Like, I'm curious because I know you have like a very unique approach to like mindfulness, spirituality. I think like there's pieces that people can draw from and apply to their life from the way you go about it.
Yeah, I think like my biggest regret along the whole way is just like being an asshole to myself. Like that's the biggest thing that I regret, because it's like I think those dark places come and go for everybody, but I think for myself I've been trying to achieve this huge massive goal for so many years. And really at the beginning I was like, in 2018 I was like, I'm gonna win a gold medal at the 2022 Olympics, and that was ridiculous, like it really was. And I didn't come close to that. I didn't qualify at those Olympics or anything, wasn't even close to. But I think that the lesson behind that for me is just that there's lessons in all of those places. And so the thing that I regret the most is just being so hard on myself in those moments where it was like there was actually something to be learned. It wasn't just like a slap in the face, even though it felt like a slap in the face. So I don't really know if that answers your question.
No, that definitely does. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, no, not at all. Yeah, I think just being more gentle on myself and just trusting the process a little bit more. I have the whole way along for sure. I definitely have trusted the process all the way along. But I know through and through that the last 4 years, I was so mean to myself sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, I'm guilty of it all the time. I'll be the first to admit, like, I'm hard on myself. I know others who are hard on themselves. The strategy that I've heard a lot of people talk about, influencers in particular, is like, imagine yourself as an 80-year-old and then also as an 8-year-old. And imagine, fast forward to that 80-year-old self and imagine if you were there right now looking back at where you're at today compared to where you were at 8 years old. How have you progressed? What have you done? Did you imagine that you were going to be able to do that at 20 years old? And I think for someone like you, looking back over those past 4 years, despite how hard you were on yourself, probably grew a ton in the process. I mean, would you attribute that to all of the work that you did outside of being hard on yourself and just the practice, effort, training? Like, what goes into, those past 4 years, when I know you didn't make that Olympic goal in 2022, but what goes into making it for 2026?
Yeah, I think that it's, that was a super unrealistic goal, but having that massive goal definitely projected me forward into the results that I do have. I debuted on the World Cup in like my second competitive season, and I don't think that without that huge Olympic goal I would have done that. And so yeah, I think that the success I have had has definitely come from like the work of being like, yeah, okay, I feel like an Olympic gold medalist now, and using that mentality through all of these lower level races definitely has projected me into, like winning the NorAm Cup this year and having I had 10 consecutive podiums on the NorAm this year, David. Like, that's crazy. I looked back through like a ton of the female results, and like nobody has had 10 consecutive podiums on the NorAm Cup, which is like, that's a pretty good feeling. And then also just looking back, like as you're saying, like what would 80-year-old you say and what would 8-year-old you say? And I use that concept, like what would 21-year-old me say about winning the NorAm Cup? Like 21-year-old me would be like shitting their pants right now. Like they would be having the best time of their life. So it's like, yeah, that's just where you have to live from, right?
Yeah, and it's, perspective's everything. And I think in this day and age, we're always dulled by like all the positives, the highs that come along. And it's like, not every day is going to be like that, right? And you got to kind of stay even keel. I think that's what a lot of really good athletes, business people, they're able to stay even keel. But yeah, 10 podiums in a row is pretty good. There's a reason we were working hard to get after you, make sure we were able to sign you to CSM and have you become a part of the team. The part that interests me is like, you were able to, in 2022, have room created for you to compete on the NorAm Cup because of COVID-19 closures, canceling a qualification race. Like, in such a, again, dark time of COVID, a door opened for you. Can you explain how that felt?
Yeah, so I guess like so there's kind of 2 years of COVID competition, if you will. The first one was in 2021. And so what happened that year was there was no NorAm. Canada and America basically said, COVID is too much. It's too much for us to handle. We don't want anybody traveling around. So everybody's going to stay at home. There's no competitions. But in Europe, athletes are considered essential, which is a super cool thing. And that was the year that I debuted on the World Cup. So I was able to go overseas and compete in my first World Cups. And then beyond that, we were actually allowed to stay and compete in the national level competition in Europe. So I had a chance to race with all of those European athletes who I don't normally get to compete at the lower levels. And that really helped me move forward. And then the following year, which was kind of like the second COVID year, Canada did open up competition. So there was a North American Cup. But that year in the preseason, I had gone overseas to compete in the World Cups, but I needed like a certain result at a Europa Cup to compete on the World Cup. And that qualification race got canceled because of COVID. There was like a COVID outbreak in the area. And so they basically said like, no, we're not hosting this race anymore. It's done. And I was torn up because that was basically the race that I needed to compete on the World Cup to even have a chance of qualifying in the 2022 Olympics. So when that happened, I was like, heartbreak. I was pissed. I was crying. Like, I didn't want to go home to Canada. I didn't have a plan to go home to Canada. And it was just like, yeah, worst time ever. And I got on a call with my coach, Danielle, and she's like, well, what are you going to do? Are you going to quit? Like, are you done? Are you quitting SnowboardCross because you didn't make your goal? And I was like, well, no, like, as I imagined it, if I had gone to the 2022 Olympics, I would still be competing in SnowboardCross after that happened. And so she said, okay, so what are you going to do? I'm like, well, I guess this is an opportunity to go back and compete on the NorAm, which is exactly what you're talking about, right? COVID brought opportunities, even though it didn't feel like it. And so previously, I was just competing on the World Cup under like a preliminary qualification, but that spot could get taken away based on qualification results or whatever, like happened in that year. That qualification result got canceled due to COVID, so then I didn't have a World Cup spot anymore. And so the next option or the next way to race on the World Cup is to finish in the top 3 on the North American Cup, which is what I've done this year and what I did last year. And so when COVID was happening, it basically gave me the opportunity to go back to the NorAm and try and re-qualify for the World Cup. And like, this is kind of like a pivotal moment for me because I had been trying to put myself into this place of racing on the World Cup, qualifying for the Olympics, all of this sort of stuff. I've been doing all of this work on paper to create these stories of like, this is who I am, this is what I'm doing, this is where I'm going. And just like getting into that energy before it happens. And so that year in 2022 on the North American Cup, it was like, okay, the short-term goal is to like finish in the top 3. And, you know, I had until like the end of the season to do that. And then I was ranked 2nd overall before like the last race. And then I got coronavirus and I couldn't go to the last race. And so I was like super upset because I felt like I needed to go to this race. Like, how am I going to continue to like qualify, all this sort of stuff. And then we realized that I had competed so well up until that point that I actually didn't even need to go to the last race to finish in the top 3. And so this is like a moment where it was like, okay, I've been putting myself into this energy of like, you know, I'm going to finish on the top 3. I'm going to have this World Cup spot, all this sort of stuff. And then that actually happened for me before the end of the season. And so like from a spiritual perspective, it was like I got ahead of the energy. I was already in it before the timeline even finished of needing to complete that task. So that was like a really cool feeling for myself.
Yeah, probably a relief as you're like coughing and losing your sense of smell.
Yeah, it was pretty good to be like, oh, okay, yeah, I have coronavirus, but I'm good. Like we did what we needed to. So that was sick.
Any lasting effects from COVID? How long did that take to recover?
Mm, I was down sick for like 4 days, like just out cold. And then I definitely had long COVID for probably like 2 or 3 weeks. Just energy levels were crap, like needing to take a nap every single day. I don't think I have any lasting effects now, at least not that I'm
Mm.
aware of, but it was pretty garbage
Yeah.
for a while.
Yeah, it was a tough one. I still can't really
Hmm.
smell. I got like 10, 15% of it left. Smell
Really?
like bacon and poop. That's about it. It's a tough combo.
Oh my
It's the only things I can smell. Yeah, away she goes. What are you gonna do? It's just
Yeah,
down a
fair
sense.
enough.
That's all right. You got to make up for it with decent personality, some excitement, caffeine, whatever you need, right? Uh,
Yeah.
when's the next time you're back in Kelowna? I know you're up in Whistler. What do you do in your summers? Like, what does off season look like for Kennedy?
Off seasons are super fun for me. I spend a lot of time strength training and mountain biking for the most part. And then yeah, being in Whistler, like there's tons of lakes and cool hikes to do and just hanging out with friends. Uh, yeah, I just try to give it a good balance, like save 25% of my time for friends and leisure, and then the other 75% is like strength training, earning some money, and mountain biking. Mountain biking's such a cool crossover sport, especially in somewhere like Whistler. If anybody knows anything about mountain biking, they know that Whistler is like one of the best places in the world. And so being able to ride like the flow trails with all the jumps and the berms and the rollers, like it's a direct crossover to SnowboardCross. So it's
Yeah,
cool.
we kind of won the lottery when it comes to being born in a country that has everything on the west side to west coast, best coast, The topography that's available, the geography that's available here in Western Canada is second to none, both for winter and summer sports. I'm always
Yeah,
curious just because I didn't know if you kept playing basketball or whatever happened in the summer. Like your training, strength training, I know you're getting after it in the gym a bunch. You're doing your downhill motor or your downhill biking, but like anything in particular that directly relates that you would suggest young snowboarders to maybe do in their off season or incorporate into their training as it directly relates? Or what do you do for like your training? Are you following a program? How do you go about that?
Yeah, so training with the BC provincial team, I'm super fortunate because we have a trainer that actually just builds a sport specific program for us. He's been working with this team for something like 15 years or 18 years or something crazy. And he sent multiple athletes to the Olympics. He has a couple Olympic medals under his belt. So he definitely knows what he's doing and can definitely do that. So I would say to young athletes, like if you don't have a trainer through your team, even just like building strength is super important because you're taking big crashes, especially in our sport. So your muscle is like your natural body armor. Aside from that, like if you have the opportunity to be on snow in the summertime, it's super important. Doing an end of season training camp like we're doing right now just helps build like resiliency and like focus and dedication because you're completely spent from a season. And so if you can go out at the end of the season and just like put down everything that you have and push those limits even further, it's just going to benefit you once the season comes back around again. We also do go down to South America or Australia in the summertime to get back on snow, which is super rad to be able to snowboard in those summer months. I've actually snowboarded in every single month of the year. Not in a whole year, but I have snowboarded in every single month of the year.
That's sick. That's cool.
Yeah,
Goals for
yeah,
myself.
yeah,
Um,
exactly.
I was going to ask, you talk about your coach who's giving you that program. Were there any people that growing up you were watching, consuming, and you were like, oh, I want to be like her or him growing up, or I'm going to try and emulate the way I ride to the same way that they do?
I would say when I was growing up, not really. I just like saw the sport as a whole and just like wanted to be part of it and wanted to do it. In recent years, though, there definitely are athletes that I watch on the World Cup, males and females, where it's like, oh, my technique is a little bit like that. Maybe I can try to do it a little bit more like them. I guess like just to name a few of those people, like Luca Egibar, he's like one of the top males on the World Cup. And then Charlotte Banks, she just won the World Cup tour, which is super cool. She's like really good at heel side turns, so I definitely watch her for that. And yeah, just like taking little pieces from everybody and trying to make it my own, or just add to what I already have going on.
Okay, so you said Charlotte has good heel turns. What's your go-to move, or what's your like?
What's my thing?
Yeah.
What's my thing?
What's Kennedy's thing?
I don't really know. Like for me, maybe I just like don't see myself in the light that I need to see myself in yet. But like I just really see myself as somebody who's like still learning and like still trying to really put things together. Mostly because I just feel like I don't. Well, not even feel like I know I don't have that really solid basic foundation that a lot of the other riders do. So maybe I just don't see myself as like somebody to look to or somebody that has like special moves or anything like that. But maybe we'll come back to you on that note in 4 years there, David.
We'll be chatting before then, and I think there's a little bit of humble pie coming out there. I think that's probably a case of, hey, we'll do some research. I'll find your move. I know you've got something in there. If you don't yet, you'll have something figured out. But I think that's a testament to just who you are and the fact that you still know yourself. You have a lot of learning, a lot of progression to make. If you were to put this, like your trajectory on a chart and compare it to a Luca or a Charlotte, I'm sure they've been snowboarding for 2 decades. And if you think what you've been able to accomplish in the past half decade of 5 years compared to what they've done in 20, you're probably doing just fine. So that's my piece. I wanted to put that out there because I know we're going to be celebrating a ton of your success in the future. I can't thank you enough for coming on the show today, sharing your story. I really appreciate your time, Kennedy. As you know, as someone who listens to the podcast, you know the way we wrap up every episode is we ask our guests what their biggest piece of advice would be for the next gen. Despite the fact you've provided 40 minutes and 30 seconds so far, what's that last piece you want to leave everyone with?
Okay, well, for any athletes who are traveling, anybody who's new to traveling, make sure that you put like an extra set of clothes and your toiletries in your backpack, because if your luggage gets lost for more than 3 days, you might end up like me, buying granny panties in the back of a convenience store in tiny little town in Austria, and that's not a fun experience. So make sure you have extra clothes in your backpack when you travel. But additionally to that, just stay focused and like find a coach outside of your sport that's going to hold your dream more true to you than you even could. Like I'm so fortunate to have Danielle at the Spiritual Room doing that for me, because she doesn't really know anything about the politics of my sport, which can kind of get in the way of like how you might view your pathway. But having somebody that just trusts and believes in me and believes that we're going to get to my goal is like so beneficial. So yeah, find somebody that believes in you more thoroughly than yourself.
Some wise words from Kennedy Justinen. Thank you so much for coming on the Athletes Podcast. I'm grateful to be able to call you a friend, work with you here, and I'm excited to celebrate your success moving forward, Kennedy.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me on today, David, and looking forward to everything else that we do in the future.
Oh, so much to come. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks.
That's the end of the 172nd episode of the Athletes Podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, you saw Rosie perk up because that means it is the last minute of this episode. We thank you so much for tuning into the show, continuing to support the Athletes Podcast as we aim to educate, entertain, and inspire the next generation of athletes. Be sure to check out our website where we have sales going on our polo shirts just in time for golf season. You will not regret it. They're Rolo golf shirts. Try them out. I guarantee you'll like them. I'm your host, David Stark. Thank you again for tuning into the Athletes Podcast. Phoenix Wayland is our editor and producer. Jordan Maslin is our website and app developer. Again, thank you for tuning into the show, and we'll see you next week for another.